but I want to get to this. Some strategies. We talked about discipline. We started with discipline, right? And we talked about that. And we're going to get back to the behavior plan sort of after lunch. So I'm going to have you do some things with that. But some more about discipline and more effective parenting strategies. Okay, and we talked about the idea of you're teaching your child that you really want them to sort of own the behavior and be accountable for it and responsible for it. So part of that, and this is just from different research that has come out of different programs, parenting programs, that would be effective ways of working with kids, is you want to communicate what the expectations are to the child with very minimal number of rules. So kind of a less is more sort of thing. But in all fairness, the kids need to know, right? What do you want them to do? Okay, so sometimes we see people getting upset with kids, but you know, the kids really aren't clear on what the expectations are, what the rules. Okay, so anytime you're establishing rules, and definitely you see this with teachers in the classroom, they really spend some time going over the rules with the kids. And sometimes they even have them posted all over the wall, and they're hanging up all over the classroom kind of thing. You want to emphasize the child's strengths. Again, you want to build their self-esteem, right? You want to empower them that they can do this. Okay? And so it's something to think about when you're talking to the child, that you're also letting them know that you know that they can do this. Providing opportunities for the child to reiterate the rules. There's parents that make sure that their child or children are aware of what the rules are, and so they ask them. And definitely teachers in classrooms, they ask their kids in the classroom. And what you'll see typically is so I remember subbing for different classes going through school, so it's kind of interesting, the different grade levels. But third graders, they tell you the rules. So if I'm a substitute teacher in the third grade class and I don't do things according to the rules, they'll say, no, Miss R, you can't, teacher doesn't do that. She doesn't put the names on the board. So they know the rules, okay, and that's what's, again, these are typical developing kids. But giving them an opportunity to let them reiterate it rather than you having to tell them. Now we mentioned this, again, looking at if it's reinforcing or not, but taking time to discuss appropriate and inappropriate behaviors. I've seen some people that do this so often that, wait a minute, it could be a bit of a red flag. There's something reinforcing that's going on there. Okay, and I mentioned that my sister will do this with, with my niece and kind of go over this and explain. And then she gives her some more time, okay, which also reinforces that whole, tantrum type of thing. However, to discuss what's appropriate and inappropriate is okay, but again, if it's used regularly as a pattern, and if it seems to be a reinforcer, they don't need to do it anymore. And in fact, having the child reiterate the rules and tell you, okay? And teaching the skills necessary for appropriate behavior. Okay, so again, you want to make sure that they have an understanding of what would be the expected behavior, what the expected behavior looks like, okay, and not only just what it looks like, but the fact of the matter is you have so many parents that, what's the saying,
as I say, not as I do.
Not as I do. Yeah.
I heard that one.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it goes back, and that goes back to when you think of observational learning. But it's huge, Kids go by, you can, talk to them and talk to them and talk to them and tell them this and tell them this. But the thing is, what are you doing? What are you doing? Okay, are you yelling at the neighbor next door? Are you having a tantrum in the car because you're upset at somebody doing something, and so what are you modeling for them? So it's real important that we do be aware of that. And again, you know, parents have their tendencies, and when they have parenting classes, you go into details about these different tendencies and patterns of behavior that the parents have. But you really do need to be aware of them and conscious of it. And it's not real easy, because it has to be something that you have to, it doesn't come automatic, that you'll stop and you'll say, okay, what am I doing? But even interacting, you know, interacting with your husband and your other kids, and you know, what is this child in the house actually seeing taking place? If you're able to, setting up practice situations and role playing. And I remember, you know, my sister-in-law doing this pretty routinely and really well, I thought, with my nieces and nephews. And if they would kind of if they would behave in a way that she didn't feel was appropriate, she would say, "Okay, let's try that again," and they'd reverse basically. What can you do differently about that? And so they'd sort of role play it and go backwards and then role play it again. And remarkably, you know, yeah, she had already discussed what was appropriate and inappropriate. She didn't need to go there. She just gave it to them. And so that's kind of the ownership of it. You know, that you're accountable, you're responsible, and you know what, you can correct it. It wasn't, what are you doing? Why did you do that? I told you not to do that before. Don't ever do that again. Okay, those are some of the things that naturally come out. It was like, okay, let's try that again and see if you can, you know, make a better choice. In a very sort of calm, you know, she did it in this calm, patient manner that was just, oh. Okay, and people in the field typically believe, if you look at parenting literature, that establishing a routine for children is usually best. We talked about structure. You guys mentioned structure when you mentioned discipline, boundaries, setting limits. All in the context of some sort of regular routine is helpful. Most typically, people in general like that. Human beings like that. We know that, hey, this is going to happen and this is going to happen, and there's some expectation. It's when you come into work and you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know what office you're going to be in today, you don't know what's going to go, you know, when there's not any structure, it can create a lot of anxiety. Okay, so that's part of it. It sort of helps with when you have this routine in place. And that way, too, transitioning kids from one thing to another becomes a little bit easier when you already have an established routine. And encouraging children to monitor their own behavior, so asking them about their behavior, and making sure that you notice things that are, if it's a desirable behavior, that we are paying attention to it. And I know that sounds silly, but oftentimes we pay so much attention to all the problem behavior that we don't point out to them when they're actually doing something that you want them to do, even if it's just sitting there quietly watching the TV. And you can actually say something about that. I like the way you're sitting there, you know, so quietly watching TV. I like the way you responded to your brother.
Just hearing it makes me feel good.
There you go. See, it works on JJ, then it should work on everybody. Okay, and staying away from don't and why. A lot of the literature on parenting really emphasizes kind of staying away from this, because again, it's really more admonishing the child, and it doesn't really put the control, give the control to the child. So basically telling them what it is that they need to do and what can they do next time, like my sister-in-law would do. What is it that you can do and what did we talk about? You could mention that. But typically coming off with don't and why is already, it's coming off very negatively on the child and accusatory, and that they made a bad decision and that kind of thing. We just want to let them know, you know, that they have the opportunity to correct it. And so we want to frame it more positively. But again, you have to be aware that you even use those words. You know, some people aren't aware of how often they use don't and why. Don't do, you know, don't hit your brother. Don't throw those toys. You know, it's don't. Another thing is it's much more effective to tell somebody what they should do rather than what they shouldn't, just psychologically, if you want them to learn it. So if you think about it, if you know, we were playing baseball and I told you guys, whoever was playing in left field, and I told if I mentioned to the hitter, say, don't hit it to left field, don't hit it to left field, it's going to be likely he's going to hit it to left field. Okay, so you want to tell people what you want them to do. Okay, so even when you frame it that way, it's likely that it's now been it's in their mind in left field, and it's going to go to, you know, it's going to go to left field kind of thing. So, although that tends to be a big tendency of parents, is that we tell them what we don't want them to do rather than what we do want them to do. Okay.